I got in touch with a resource out here called DAP, Desert AIDS Project, and they told me that, look, you wouldn't qualify for going there anyway. If you're HIV positive, you have flu-like symptoms, you can't be around other people right now. Go to the hospital. And I was so afraid of going to the hospital. For some reason, it was like imprinted in my brain that if I went to the hospital, they were going to drug test me, I was going to go to jail, and I was never going to see the light of day again. And I remember having this moment. We call it a God shot, or a moment from the universe, just this divine intervention. The little voice in the back of my head was like, "Yeah, but what could possibly be worse than this? It's not jail. Jail is not worse than this, And if you're in jail, you know, you're not you don't have to
Mhm.
do this anymore." And to the hospital, and I didn't get arrested. They let me out. I slept on a park bench that night, but on March 17th I got a call from the county saying that they were going to put me in a hotel.
Mm.
My clean date is March 17th of 2020. I walked in the hotel room, and I hit the bed, and I like cried because for whatever reason I knew there was something there that just told me that was like, this is it. This is
Mhm.
you're done. This can be it.
Hello, beautiful people. Yes, I am talking to you. Are you ready to feel confident AF, free from the expectations and opinions of others, and create ultimate self-trust in who you are, what you say, and how you show up in every part of your life? If you answered a hell yes, I am, I guarantee this episode will empower you to be 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed. It's time for you to strut your stuff, express yourself with freedom, and fully embrace every freaking fabulous part of you. Let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome to another episode of Road to Radical Visibility. My name is Rachel Freemon Sowers, also known as the Break Free Bitch, because I am passionate about helping people just like you break free from the toxic social constructs, expectations, and opinions that have kept you from experiencing your life exactly the way that you want to. And it is absolutely possible. If you've hung out here with me for very long, you'll know that my personal and professional motto is being 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed. And oh my gosh, you guys are in, well, me too. Let's just break it all down like that. It's going to be, and as I say this, I'm laughing, like it's going to be a treat today. As you can tell, I have a guest, and if you're watching on the YouTube channel, and we met literally last week. I think it was on the Wednesday or Thursday. And I was just like, wow, we are both being approved of being media ambassadors for the AIDS Lifecycle ride. And it's, as you'll hear through the bio, how we met and why I've asked Rory to be on the show today. So let me read and introduce him to you. Rory Slikker, him, is a clinical outreach specialist for an LGBTQAI plus affirming addiction treatment center called Michael's House in Palm Springs, California. Born and raised in the small agricultural conservative town of Lompoc, I said that right?
Yeah.
California, Rory's journey to radical visibility began with very humble beginnings. A troubled home life, high school death threats, HIV, and addiction taught Rory how to survive first and live authentically second. That is going to resonate with so many of you. Please stick around for this whole freaking interview. Today, Rory is a sober man and activist that uses his story to help others struggling with addiction, mental health, and internalized homophobia, which is a real thing. He is the co-founder of the LGBTQ Association for Addiction and Mental Health Professionals, a media ambassador, and a participant in the AIDS Lifecycle, and sits on a half dozen committees responsible for bringing sober conferences to Southern California. Please help me welcome my guest, Rory.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy this worked out, and it's so great to have met you. Yeah, just last week. So I'm stoked.
It's crazy how the synchronicity, if we allow it to happen, the synchronicity really does happen in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful process. All right. So the first question I ask every single client when they come, every single guest when they come on the show, How's that, right?
I do the same thing. I do the same exact thing. I get it.
Is what does radical visibility mean to you?
Yeah. Radical visibility to me is it's all about living my most unapologetic, unauthentic life and being my
Mm,
most unapologetic and unauthentic self, authentic
mm,
self. Excuse me.
uh-huh.
And yeah, just being me 100% of the time, like you had said, right? And
Hmm.
it's uh it's not always it's not a linear process going from A to B. It's about making progress each day for me, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
the goal for me anyways, to get to a good place of that.
and we talked earlier as we just got to know each other a little bit last week. We talked about you coming from a very small conservative town, where I live in Redding, California, is still very conservative. What has been some of your experiences that have led you to say, I want to become more radically visible?
Yeah. So yeah, like you had mentioned, Lompoc, it's it's in a little tiny agricultural city. I would say it's a little bit more liberal than you would think for a town that size and its location, but it's a good 10, 15, sometimes 20 years behind the rest of the
Mm,
country in terms of progress, and especially for LGBTQ people. There were no gay when I was going through schooling, there were no gay role models or icons.
mm,
I knew that the people that I did see on TV that were gay, that's not what I looked like or how I felt or how I sounded or how I acted, or at
mm,
least I didn't want to be. Actually, it's probably more accurate. I didn't want to be
mm,
like how they acted or sounded or were received. And so I knew that if gay equals that, then I didn't want to be gay. And
mm,
and I didn't want to be on the back end of the bullying for the people who were who did identify as gay or who were marked or labeled as gay.
mhm.
Uh, so that's a big part of it for sure. That, and I've done a lot of work recently. Like I mentioned, I'm in recovery. I've got a lot of tools in my toolbox that have helped me kind of unravel some of the lies that I've told myself or that I've been
Mhm,
taught about myself.
mhm.
Um, and so I had mentioned, it's a process getting from A to Z. Sometimes you skip a couple letters here or there. Sometimes you go past Z and you repeat things again, you
Yes.
know. But it's been a wonderful and a beautiful journey. And I know that if I'm not willing to shed that like external
Mhm,
shell, that layer of protection and stuff, I'm not going to really find true peace. And that's been proven to me by being able to chip away at it little by
mhm,
little and
mhm,
finding more genuine happiness as I've,
mhm.
trudged the road to happy destiny, as we say.
Well, and really, it's defining what that happiness means to us, right? When we begin to peel back all these layers, that's a very common phrase, you peel back the layers. It can be really scary what you see. I really, too, resonate with, what you had seen people in the LGBTQ community were like previously. And I'm sure I have a good 25, if not more years on you, just FYI.
Or less.
I don't know. And I remember seeing that. And even in my, back then, being raised in the church and picketing against gay people and all of those things. And here I am now, an LGBTQ plus person wanting to be 100%, myself. And it's us decoding and letting go of the lies that we were told about ourselves. I mean, that's like you said, it's a beautiful process, but it's not for the faint of heart.
No, absolutely not. I remember my first Pride, and it was like I had arrived. I had left my
Mm,
hometown. I moved to Long Beach, and Long Beach has a really great Pride. It's less about the commercial. It's less commercial and more
mm,
community based, in my opinion.
mm,
And just feeling seen and heard for the first time ever, and exploring, myself physically and emotionally and even sexually in some respects, like being
mm,
able to just be myself. And for me, it was like, oh, I've arrived.
mm,
But, on the flip side, I saw the picketers, as we're walking in, and just no shame in the game. And I remember just that feeling it sparked of like
yeah.
anger, like these are my people and I have to protect my people all of a sudden, or
Mm,
I didn't internalize the shame or any guilt that came from the words that they were saying, but it definitely sparked something in me. Like there's much work to be done, and I am very happy to say that it seems like at least I live in a bubble. I live in Palm Springs, you know, and I lived in West Hollywood, and I lived in
Yeah.
Long Beach. I've lived in a lot of the gay bubbles. In our gay bubbles, those crowds have gotten smaller and smaller over the years. But I know that that's not the case. I'm extremely privileged with where I live. I know that that's not the case everywhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Man, here in Palm Springs, we're fortunate enough to have like the whole SWAT team show up for Pride events and for marches and rallies and stuff. There's like hidden
Yeah.
snipers all over town, making sure that we stay safe. So yeah, there's still much work to be done elsewhere. That's for sure.
Right. And I think, well, one of those places is where I live. I mean, like, we're not really supported. We petitioned for for Pride Month being in June, and literally were torn apart with hate. And some really beautiful people in our community, but so much hate about, us as people and us as human beings. And, I think it's an interesting place to be when you do things like us that are, we advocate
Right.
for people to be able to express themselves, and how they need to do that, in the world. The love bubble is real, especially with the AIDS life cycle.
Yeah.
We experienced that for the first time last year, and it is insane how you have withdrawals from it when you leave.
Yeah.
Like,
I have, man, I have a posse here that's like, all right, make sure you have your plans. Yes, you need physical rest, but like maybe find a cuddle puddle or some buddies to hang out with and go to the
mhm.
movies with, you know, for the next couple days after because the crash is very real.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's like, okay, how do we get more of that? And even where I live, I don't know if it's the same where you grew up, but where I live is like, even a lot of the LGBTQ plus community here maybe believes that they are more free, but they're still so suppressed by the culture that's immediately in our environment, until you go out and travel and do things like the AIDS life cycle and do all those things for more exposure. You don't realize how suppressed you are. It's kind of like that frog that boils in the pot but doesn't know it's dying, It's
Right.
like
Oh
we
yeah,
need to
great
be
analogy.
advocates.
Yeah. I got to give some props to Lompoc because they have come a long way since I
Mm,
was a kid there. You know, I went, so part of my story, and we'll get into this too, is addiction is it plays a big part in my story. And there was one point where I decided to move back to Lompoc
mm,
to seek some safety, and I lived with a friend and stayed close to my family and stuff. And I remember, it was a number of years after, or a handful of years after I had left, and this was when Pulse happened. And
mm,
I remember exactly where I was at, when we caught word of the shooting in Orlando. And how affected I was by it and how unaffected the people around me were by it. It was
mm.
tragic that there was another mass shooting, but for me it was like I felt targeted. It was that same feeling of like my people, or am I
Yeah.
truly safe, and questioning my area and how I carried myself. And I'd be lying if I said that that wasn't influential in how I try to carry myself today and living more authentically, but
Mhm.
I digress. I hosted a candlelit visual for myself, really, because there were a handful of other LGBTQ people there, but people showed up, and
Mm,
if not to support queer people, to support me, who is an openly queer person in this
mhm.
small town, and and since then, I think I don't spend too much time there these days, but I get the impression that being gay there isn't quite the same as it once was when I was younger. It's more like an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And hey, we
Mhm.
love everybody, so I got to give them some credit in that sense. That doesn't take away from my story by any means, but
Right. And
yeah,
I think there's so many different layers to becoming ourselves and being ourselves in a visible way, not only to ourselves but to other people, and
right,
all the ways in which we've learned to repress ourselves. You said, like, kind of don't tell, or it's fine, we love everyone. And yet underneath there are some things that are really these toxic social constructs, like, well, we love everyone, you live your life over there, but don't say anything about it, and I don't want to hear about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And how that does equal us to be questioning of ourselves, you know
oh
and
yeah.
even
There's
happens
much
in our
work to be
community.
done. There's
Hmm.
still much work to be so much work to be done still. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about your journey through addiction and coming out of that.
Sure. So like I said, grew up in Lompoc. I moved out my parents' house when I was like 16.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest of four. My parents had their own fair share of struggles. My dad's in recovery today as well. But fair share of struggles. Super young parents. My mom and dad were both teenagers when I came into the world, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, just that kind of set us up for, they leaned on me a lot. Oldest kid of four, like I said. When my parents separated, I was 12, 13, 14 years old, and my dad went into the rooms. He got clean and sober. My mom kind of struggled for a bit. And I took on, this like this the I became the golden child, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
hero child in our family dynamic, and that the pressure was a bit much. It was kind of tough. Eventually, my mom took her turn to kind of go and get herself situated and herself together. And we moved in with my dad and, newly sober individual in a one-bedroom apartment. Five of us kind of, sharing the bed or
Wow.
sleeping on the floor and stuff. Didn't really seem super conducive. And I moved out. I left. It was sparked by an argument, don't get me wrong. And my dad and I have since long since cleared that up. But, I took the opportunity to leave and I wanted it because, I was living. I had friends that were allowing me to live there, and they were allowing me to drink and be cool, and stay up past curfews and all these kinds of things. But they also told me that you have a place to stay so long as you finish up school. So I did. I finished up school. That piece of living with friends was the whole. It's a catalyst for this, of how easy I found it to rely on the kindness of strangers, right? These weren't
Mm.
necessarily strangers, but I learned how to be manipulative in that space. I knew how to say the things or do the things,
Mm-hmm.
say yes to the drink, take the shot, stay up a little bit later, sleep with the girl so that I had something to talk with because it was very much so a closet
Mm.
case. I was very, very good at being what I thought you wanted me to be, as opposed to what I
Mm.
wanted me to be. And that came from some childhood stuff. My parents needed me to show up for my siblings. They needed
Yeah.
me to finish school, to be less of an issue for them while they figured their stuff out. And
Yeah.
that translates. It's part of my story through from start to today. Something I'm still working on.
Yeah.
And that's that being my most authentic self, right? My most
Mm-hmm.
valid, unapologetic, authentic self. Um, and so that, when I turned 18, I moved out of their home. I moved to Long Beach. Like I said, I felt like I had arrived. I was taken under the wing of some drag queens there. And similarly, if I can sneak a drink here or there, I was, trying to, be part of. And
Mm.
I felt like I found it, and I found my community. I live with some family there. I ended up facing a bout of homelessness when there was a disagreement between myself and some family there, and for the first time, but this wasn't new to me. I remember I had learned how to be manipulative and to like bat my eyes and how to do and say the things to get the things that I really wanted, and I hopped around from situationship to situationship after that, and I ended up with one individual. And at some point during the relationship, I started converted. I was 20 years old, and I had contracted HIV. And I was
Mm-hmm.
drinking alcoholically in the sense that I was drinking to escape feelings. Was maybe wasn't a blackout drinker, but I was seeking a mood or mind altering substance to get out of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. And for me, it wasn't like, oh, I had a long day at work. Let me have a drink to get rid of the stress. It was like, my life is going good. Let me go see if I can ruin it for a quick second, or things really suck. Let me get out of here real quick. Or who cares about so and so or what I
Mm-hmm.
said I was going to do. It was get out of whatever pressure I was putting on myself, because I was living in a cage that I built for myself, right? And it was a really pretty cage that people like to look at and gawk at and wanted to be around, but it wasn't it wasn't real. It wasn't real for
Mm-hmm.
me, and that went on for a little while. I ended up I found some passions. I was a professional dancer for a number of years there, and I had taken on a scholarship in Pasadena, moved there, and lived with some friends for a bit, with untreated HIV, really not knowing what to do. Thankfully, that was short-lived. I connected with an individual who helped me get on meds. He lived in West Hollywood. He was a mentor. He taught me all about, the AIDS crisis, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a long-term AIDS survivor, one of the longest living AIDS survivors from the mid '80s, and
Amazing.
he's very special to me. I will say, with all of that comes some demons, so I do have to pay him some respects because he helped me get on meds and he taught me some very, very important lessons there. But he also
Mhm.
taught me about drugs, and what the party lifestyle was like. And
Mhm.
hey, if it meant I was going to be cool and got to hang out with you and stuff, and eventually offered me a place to stay, I was going to do it, and so I did. Um, those
Mhm.
drugs, one drug led to another, and eventually I was snorting meth on a daily basis.
Mhm.
6, 7 months. That situationship ended in an arrest. I called the police because he had laid hands on me at one morning, and
Mhm.
we ended up both being arrested for felony of domestic violence because of whose word are they going to take, right?
Right.
So I moved back to Lompoc at that point, and I got sober. Sober adjacent, excuse me. It was more like I stopped doing meth, and for me that was a big deal. I
Mhm.
was still drinking alcoholically, going to the bars, and Lompoc, all of the bar every single one of the bars is walking distance from each other, or
Mm.
almost all of them. Like you can bar hop in the same night within the hour if you really wanted to, and so we did. It was the thing to do after each work night, or for whatever reason. I didn't really need a reason, just show up and go do the things.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that, I looking back on it, like I changed my whole persona. Remember, I had moved to LA, and like I was finally able to live free and do what I wanted to do. And when I moved back to Lompoc, I was determined to still be openly and out as a gay person. But I
Mhm.
noticed, like, I was wearing the flannels instead of the cutoff shirts and stuff like that, or I was wearing the boots instead of the cute sneakers and things like that.
Yep.
So like just the little things, and like to me,
Mhm.
it didn't. I didn't even notice it at the time that I was doing it, but there's more layers to that shell that I was putting up there, to the wall. And I ended up moving back to LA. I had met somebody when I was younger, and he and I fell madly in love and kind of kept our distance from one another, just not really knowing what to like how to pursue the other person. And eventually, we decided to take a chance on it. We were together for the next 2, 3 years or so, and but I had untreated crystal meth addiction going on in the
Mm.
background there. So with that came all of the depression and the anxiety and the insecurities and the fear, the not knowing how to communicate, and the sneaking and the lying and the cheating
Mm.
eventually. And he looked out for his safety and mine as well, but his safety, and I don't blame him for that. He had to cut ties, and we
Yeah.
moved out. And we tried to date, not living with each other, and eventually it didn't work, and I ended up falling back into full swing crystal meth addiction, and daily user, smoking it however I could get it from whoever I could get it. And there's a really dark underbelly to these major cities
Mhm.
of crystal meth addicts. When I was living in West Hollywood, the first time I had been introduced to it, I had to stay in the city for 30 days. I wasn't allowed to leave the city of West Hollywood while we were waiting for our court date. But by the way, our felony domestic violence charges were completely dropped and thrown
Mm.
out. There was a lot. Thankfully or unthankfully, I'm not quite sure.
Mhm.
Maybe I would have hit rock bottom sooner, but thankfully, there were a lot of issues on the side of the police, so they got rid of the whole case. But for 30 days there, I had to stay and interact with this person who had laid hands on me, and I had learned at that point what the underbelly of West Hollywood looked like. I
Mm.
learned that there was an entire community of people who owned the witching hours from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., doing all the things.
Mhm.
And same thing, I knew that I had a place to stay, bat my eyes, do their drugs and stuff. I'd be safe. And then when the charges were dropped, I moved back home.
Mhm.
I fell so quickly back into that community and into that lifestyle. I lost my job. I lost my apartment. I cut ties with all of my friends and family. I did some really, really terrible things to some people that I really care about, just by disappearing. They thought I was dead for a while and had to find out through some really awful means, that I wasn't, and that I was just
Mhm.
choosing not to communicate with them. Living that lifestyle, I was only able to live there for so long before I landed in Palm Springs, where kindness was a little bit more freely given to somebody who was younger and maybe had some pretty eyes and stuff and was new to the
Mhm.
community. And so I moved here. Drugs were cheaper, rent was cheaper. The guys were nice, the men were nicer. Nature's credit card went a little bit further, here.
Mhm.
So I moved here, and it went from bad to really, really worse, a lot worse. I connected with an individual who he and I looked out for each other while we were, running the streets. If I didn't have a place to stay, he did, and if he didn't have a place to stay, I did, and you know, homeless
Mm-hmm.
basically. There were a couple times where I had a physical address, I was never there, or I wasn't paying rent or something, right? Um, I was taking people hostage by, going and staying at people's places until they
Mm-hmm.
told me to leave. And eventually, January of 2020, the person that I was running around with, he got sober. He decided to go get sober, and his life was in complete shambles, much like mine. And I saw his life turn around in a matter of weeks. Like he put weight
Mm-hmm.
on, he had color in his face. He was doing this thing where people were sleeping at night, which was like a foreign concept to me as a meth addict. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, he did it. He did it, and it took me 3 months to follow suit. But March 16th, I was sick. I had flu-like symptoms. We were being told that COVID was a very real thing here in the
Mm-hmm.
States, right? We were on the news. My paranoia was kicking up on the news. I was seeing, in China how, military forces were keeping people indoors and inside and, at risk of being arrested. And so we had this idea of shelter in place looming over us. And I remember thinking, there's nobody in this entire city that I could see myself staying with for 2 weeks because we thought shelter in place was only going to be 2 weeks. And that was the gift for me. That was it. That
Mm-hmm.
was, that was my big aha moment. Like there's no way I can keep doing this. And I remember being done with the drugs, a long time before that, and just being convinced that so long as I had like a rock in my pocket, I had a place to stay, which
Yeah.
was true for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I lost the rock, I lost the friends, I lost the everything, and I called one of the county resources on March 16th. It's the last day that I put a mood or mind altering substance into my system. Um, I called, it's the 211 out here, and it helps connect people with resources. I called them, and as a young 20-something-year-old cisgendered white male who isn't a veteran with no kids, like there weren't a lot of readily available resources to me,
Mm-hmm.
and understandably so. I have every means and capability to be working and to be doing, the work to be contributing to society. So they told me that there were wait lists, but I remember I was on the phone and this woman, she got rushed off the phone. There was like people screaming in the background and people were going crazy. And she's like, I have to call you back. And so I'm starting to kind of panic, like, what was that about? It's kind of weird. And she calls me back and said, you need to get into a hospital or a shelter ASAP. We're going into lockdown tonight, and we don't really know what that means yet. I can't give you any more information, but you need to find a shelter. And so I called all the homeless shelters. I was finally willing to do something about this, and they had received the orders, and they had to cut their capacity from 100 bed or 75 beds to 10 because spaces were limited to 10 people per space
Wow.
per room. That was the thing, and
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't able to get in there. And I finally, when I got in touch with a resource out here called DAP, Desert AIDS Project, and they told me that, look, you wouldn't qualify for going there anyway. If you're HIV positive, you have flu-like symptoms, you can't be around other people right now. Go to the hospital. And I was so afraid of going to the hospital. For some reason, it was like imprinted in my brain that if I went to the hospital, they were going to drug test me. I was going to go to jail, and I was never going to see the light of day again. And I remember having this moment. We call it a God shot, or a moment from the universe, or just this divine intervention. The little voice in the back of my head was like, "Yeah, but what could possibly be worse than this? It's not jail. Jail is not worse than this, And if you're in jail, you know." You're not using you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
do this anymore. And I went to the hospital, and I didn't get arrested, you know
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really happen there. And I learned, so that was funny. They let me out. I slept on a park bench that night, but on March 17th I got a call from the county saying that they were going to put me in a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
My clean date is March 17th of 2020. I walked in the hotel room, and I hit the bed, and I like cried because for whatever reason I like I knew there was something there that just told me that was like, this is it. This is
Mm-hmm.
you're done. This can be it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for the next 4 months, I lived in that hotel, and
Mm-hmm.
I found meetings, 12-step meetings. All I had to my name, by the way, was this same exact laptop I'm using right now. Some tarot cards, which is a really big part of my spiritual practice and always has been. Um, and like some change to do some laundry and stuff. Like I didn't have anything. I only had one set of clothes, but I went into these meetings and people helped me. People heard my story and heard what was going on with me, and they brought me food. The county brought me food. I was leaning on help without expecting anything in return, without them expecting anything in return, which was a foreign concept for me. I was
Hmm.
really good at relying on the kindness of strangers, but there was always an exchange, right? And there
Right.
wasn't with these people here. And
Hmm.
life got really good really, really quick. I reconnected with the individual. He and I started dating for some time after that. It didn't really work out after a while, but I've had some really, really crazy, incredible times in recovery. And what recovery has given me is it's given me like a set of guidelines and principles and tools to look at my life and look at my past and look at the decisions I made and the people I wronged, and as a way to not make the same mistakes or do the same things again,
Hmm.
and to become a better human being, and to, like I had said earlier, chip away at that shell that I had created, chip away at the walls I had built up. um I went
Well,
back
and
and made amends to the people that I had wronged. Yeah.
mhm. It's like it's a real amazing journey to just watch. Like, I can see your story in my mind with every step of the way, right? And so you have this thing of addiction that has plagued you, or that has kept you from, yeah, honestly, just being your most authentic self, right? And then you start this, you said you started the Association for Addiction and Mental Health Professionals. Like, what caused you to say, like, hey, here's all this um adversity that I've gone through, and I have HIV and all these things, and this is what I'm going to do. So tell me, just really
Yeah.
quickly, about like what caused you to be like, change that perspective and be like, this is what's needed here.
Sure. Yeah. So, eventually I started working in treatment. I've always had a passion for helping people. So I work with a facility called Michael's House. We're an addiction treatment center here in Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
We work primarily with the LGBT population, but part of what I do is I help people get into treatment. Some
Mm-hmm.
call it business development, some call it clinical outreach, but my role is to make sure I'm finding the best fit possible for a human being seeking help, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's through private practice outpatient with a therapist, or inpatient subacute, psychiatric type of care, or somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so one way to do that is we go to these networking events, right? You bring people from all different areas of treatment together to meet and coordinate and collaborate on different types of care that they offer. But there wasn't really a space for the LGBT client to do that. And so myself and a few others, we
Mm-hmm.
came together and we thought, let's start with this. Let's start with a networking event to bring people together, LGBTQ professionals specifically, and then we'll go from there. And even if they work for LGBT inclusive versus affirming type of treatment centers, then we'll at least have those types of resources in our back
Mm-hmm.
pocket. And it has grown into being so much more. We offer educational components.
Mm-hmm.
We meet on a monthly basis, and we've been going strong for about almost a year now. And it's it's been so beautiful. We touch on topics like drawing on LGBTQ history to build and establish resiliency, and how that can be beneficial for even the straight population. Things
Mm-hmm.
like acceptance. We talk obviously about we've talked about chemsex. We did an incredible topic over the holidays for working with trans clients,
Mm-hmm.
or people of the trans experience or non-binary experience, and this just a quick story. So the speaker asks, what are things that you think of when you think about or when you think about the holidays in general, just the holidays? And people said, family and gifts and coming together and community and maybe church and celebration and happiness. And then she painted a picture for us and was like, well, what about the trans individual who has since changed genders according
Mm-hmm.
to their parents and doesn't have any of that?
Right.
If you at your facility are pushing, holidays are a time for all of these things, and you have a client that doesn't have any of those things, or historically has a really difficult time
Mm-hmm.
during this time of year, what do you do? And so it was, how do we broach those types of issues with love, kindness, and compassion? It was such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful experience, and we've since stepped away from being exclusively LGBTQ to being just an educational platform for anybody and everybody in the treatment industry, whether it's mental health,
Mm-hmm.
billing, the medical end of things. We've had
Mm-hmm.
yoga instructors and other private practice instructors come through just so that they can be better informed on how to not re-traumatize LGBTQIA individuals going
Mm-hmm.
through treatment, because it is so common when somebody goes to treatment and they're misgendered or they're put with the wrong type of room with a roommate of the wrong gender, somebody that they don't feel safe with.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that we believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We got to have shelter, food, and all some of our most basic needs met. I'm a firm believer that before I can have my basic needs met, I have to be able to identify, you know, how
Yeah.
can I accept a shower from you if you're going to put me in the wrong shower? That's I'm not going to feel safe to experience the rest.
Right. And I think like you brought it to the surface quite a while ago at the beginning of the episode. It's that safety, right? Even for you and I who have become more aware of ourselves and how we want to be, there's the safety component that is always underneath, that's underlying. And I work with a lot of trans individuals. I've been so blessed to be able to work with them, and it is true, like there are considerations, and how are we allowing ourselves, even in the LGBTQ plus AI whatever community, how are we helping each other feel more safe? How are
Right.
we, because there's so many levels and layers within that we could go on and talk for hours and hours about how each community still has its own struggles and its own struggles of acceptance within that community, right?
Right.
And so I love that you've opened up that platform. Yes, LGBTQ plus AI needs to have these resources, and we also need to get it out to other people, treatment centers, professionals. Like you're saying, it's a huge need that can really bring this awareness, because when each of us show up exactly as who we are, it really does make the world a better place. I mean, it's a huge conviction of mine.
Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly as well. I part of what I do is it falls under the marketing umbrella, but
Mm-hmm.
and so I part of my job is, I meet with other professionals in this industry, and it's not I'm oftentimes the only one in some kind of pop of color, just in my attire,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's the little things, but I refuse today to dim my shine,
Mm-hmm.
as some kids say, to meet the needs or to blend in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's so important, when I meet a client at the treatment center who is showing up, who maybe didn't have a great experience at another facility, or who has been shunned by their parents, and they see this extremely flamboyant looking homosexual in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
just with no care in the world, asking them, may I ask your pronouns, and hey, who would you prefer to work with, a male or female presenting staff member, for things like urine drug screens or for roommate situations
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. Like, the veil comes down for these people.
Mm-hmm.
They feel safe, and
Yeah.
I've seen it happen time and time again, and it's the most incredible feeling in the world to know that you're helping facilitate change for somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at those most basic needs, or most basic, in the most basic ways, in my opinion, like
Yeah.
LGBT affirming care should be the baseline. It should still be a standard. So that's our goal. That's the LGBTQ Association's goal,
Mm-hmm.
is to create some form of, and this is in the very, very early works, to create some form of standard of care for queer individuals. Any facility or therapist can say that they can work with the queer population, or that they offer LGBT affirming care, or programming or tracks, but there's no like seal of approval that really says this body came in and accredited this facility to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm sure, years out from something like that, but that's a goal of ours, is to create that, so that, patients know they have a safe space to go, or
Mm-hmm.
clients know that they have a safe space to go when they seek help.
I That's so important, because just in the therapeutic world, I mean, so many therapists will say like, "Oh, I'm affirming," or "I'm accepting," and then you get in there. I've heard this story so many times, which is why people come to me after they have these experiences. They're just, yes, that, but they have an influence of a religious influence, or they have an influence of something else. And
Right.
until the therapist does their own work about the LGBTQ plus community and how they feel and how they honestly feel about themselves in interaction with that community, it's not really affirming. like affirming doesn't always mean affirming. And it doesn't mean like, oh yeah, I'll see you, but I'm not going to acknowledge anything else that you need because this is how I do things, right? That's irritating to me as I'll get out in the therapeutic world. But people often will say like, I'm affirming because then they get more clients or, you know, whatever. But there's more to affirming than just saying, oh, okay, you know, it's okay for me to see you.
Yeah, actively not participating in shaming a queer client is not the same as being LGBT affirming. You know, it's just,
well,
yeah,
and the shaming, it doesn't even have to be overt. Let's just drop some truth right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, I mean, like, so that's a whole nother discussion for another day.
I know.
We should have like a whole panel on because I could really go off on that whole thing. So, I mean, your story is one of overcoming. It is one of huge amounts of awareness. It is one of continued awareness, continued mindfulness, and continued intentional way of being in the world. You know, you and I met through the AIDS Lifecycle Media Ambassador meeting. We're going to see each other on that ride. And I know that so many people are going to be empowered by your story, encouraged by your story. And there's so many other aspects that I think I want to do a future episode because I'm like, oh, we should talk about that and that and that. So, but for today, I just want to say, I really appreciate you coming on here. I'm so glad that you agreed to be here on such like this whim of, I don't even really know this woman, but I'm going to trust her. I'm going to go on the podcast and share your story with the, you know, just this bravery and just openness. I just want to say thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. The universe works in mysterious ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that you were put, you know, on this path, my path, and I was put on yours, and we were able to meet. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's beautiful that way. So thanks again. And I'm totally open to a future episode. We can talk about all the things.
Oh, there's going to be one. All right, my friends, I'm going to end this episode, but before I do, really quickly, just keep an eye out for any videos that are going to be coming during the AIDS Lifecycle Ride, which is going to be June 4th through the 11th. I am sure Rory and I will do a live together because that's how it's going to work out. But go to my YouTube channel. You can follow along. I'll upload videos every single day so that you can follow along in that journey. It's going to be fucking fabulous and remarkable. I'll end this video like I end every single video. Please make sure to stay true to yourself, be kind to others, and always, always, always honor the wise one that is within you. I will see you all on the next road to radical visibility. Until then, bye. Hold up, don't go yet. If this episode inspired you to be 100% yourself, 100% of the time, no shame or guilt needed, even just that little bit more, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I'm here, and I know you are too, to make a positive impact in the world. So don't forget to share the love. And if you were left wanting more of this type of kick-ass content, then don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. Until next time, make sure to stay true and be you. Until then, bye.